Everyone, thank you so much for being here. My name is Hannah Katz, and I am the New Jersey Program Manager for Rebuild by Design. If you scan the QR code on the screen, it'll take you to our Rebuild by Design New Jersey page, where you can learn more about our work and explore the tools we've built to support communities across the state. Tonight, we're featuring two recognized leaders who are taking action needed to shape the future of resilience in New Jersey. Dr. Chris Obropta and Greg Remaud, who are well-known voices and changemakers in New Jersey's environmental field. We are so honored to be hosting a sit-down today with these two, as they are considered some of the state's leading experts on climate resilience, and they bring experience and insight to nature-based solutions and what it takes to prepare our communities. But first, you'll be hearing from Rifal Imam, Rebuild by Design's incredible Rainproof New York City fellow, who stands at the forefront of our organization, leading cutting-edge research and programs that help communities adapt to living with more water. We promise to inspire you with methods and tools to take action and protect the places you love from future disaster. If you have any questions during the session, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them in the last portion of the session, or please feel free to email me at hkatz@rebuildbydesign.org. Before we get started, I'd like to provide you all with a bit of background as to what brought us here today. Rebuild by Design began as a federal initiative in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, and it was aimed at helping East Coast states to recover and rebuild in ways that would make communities stronger and more resilient in the face of future disasters. The success of those efforts led to the formation of our organization, which now works with communities across the country to rethink how we design infrastructure to better protect people as climate impacts intensify. And we partner with local leaders, experts in all levels of government to reduce risk and plan ahead. And our work ranges from large-scale design competitions to forward-thinking research and policy. And that research and policy is what I'd like to briefly mention to you today. As part of this effort, we've developed a number of free and accessible tools available for you to use on our website. And I'd like to highlight some of these tools today, where you'll find on our website, we have the Atlas of Disaster and our Atlas of Accountability. It's an interactive map that overlays federally declared disasters with congressional districts and helps you to clearly see where support is needed next. I encourage you to scan this QR code with your phone camera and to explore our site and attend our upcoming events and dive into the New Jersey Atlas of Disaster. It's a one-stop resource for understanding how disasters are impacting your community. You can even contact your elected officials directly through our site and advocate for long-term solutions. Right now, the state of New Jersey, like many states, does not have stable, dedicated funding to protect our schools, homes, hospitals, and businesses before disaster strikes. But the projects that could be done could save so much money and so many lives. So we're working to shift the conversation from recovery to prevention. When we analyzed national disaster data, one thing stood out. 92% of United States counties have experienced a federally declared disaster since 2011. In our state, every single county has had at least 5 disasters. And since 2011, we've faced 14 disasters overall, which costed New Jersey taxpayers $7.9 billion. And even though we're not in the top 5 states for the number and amount of disasters, we're among the top 5 for per capita disaster recovery spending. And that raised a big question. Why are we spending so much? And what are we doing to prevent future damage, if enough? And so without further ado, I'm very excited to begin this session and introduce you today to our speakers who are doing the work to address those questions. And as we said earlier, we hope you'll feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. First up is Rifal Imam. Rifal bridges public education, outreach, and systemic change in a fascinating new way. And she's going to tell you all about adaptation methods from communities around the world.
Thank you, Hannah. And hello, everyone. I'm going to be sharing my screen now. Do you see it? Great. So today I'll be giving everyone a quick overview of Rainproof inspiration, including our work in New York City, and hope that it will share some insights to help you imagine what a rainproof could look like in New Jersey. We're all here today because we recognize the challenge. Heavy rainfall is increasing in both frequency and intensity. I'd like everyone to take a moment and think, when was the last time heavy rainfall affected you personally? To address this challenge, Rebuild by Design has launched a research phase to understand how we could better live with water. Through this research, we learned that facing this new reality requires a systematic approach, what we like to call rainproofing. And our research led us to a simple three-part strategy for rainproofing, which is first, starting with the most socially and physically vulnerable communities. Second, creating a massive investment in multi-benefit green and blue solutions. And third, where we can't go fully green, we prioritize the co-benefit solutions. Now to look at some cities that are already learning to live with more water. Our first inspiration we draw is from Copenhagen. In 2011, a catastrophic cloudburst event flooded Copenhagen, exposing the city's weak infrastructure and had massive costs. In response, the city of Copenhagen put together their cloudburst management plan in 2012. This plan followed the natural way that water fell in heavy rain events, and they developed a comprehensive integrated approach that knit together blue infrastructure like sunken basketball courts with green infrastructure like rain gardens to ensure the city can retain, detain, and manage increasing heavy rainfall. Here's an image of their cloudburst planning, and I'd like to highlight that it shows that everything is connected, from their 254 surface level projects, which detain and retain water, to their underground 127 pipes focused on underground water management. And overall, this is costing $1.8 billion and 20 years of implementation. But I'd like to highlight the fact that rainproofing is an investment. It's an investment in our new reality of climate change. Here's an example of how this approach works in Copenhagen. This water square in Denmark uses their water detention system, which during extreme heavy rainfall, it detains the water and stores it so it doesn't overwhelm the sewer systems while preventing flooding from surrounding areas like the streets. But on dry days, it acts as public infrastructure and public spaces where people can mingle. Now to look at Amsterdam and the Netherlands, which is a different approach because they didn't actually have any cloudburst event happen and has been working on water management for years. When I say years, it's like 750 years of history that they've been working on water management. But as a whole, the Netherlands has a 2 pounds risk, which is both heavy rainfall risk and flood sensitivity to sea level rise. And so they took inspiration from cloudbursts, like what we're doing today is learning from others. They took inspiration from Copenhagen and what was happening in Copenhagen and decided to act now before any major catastrophic cloudburst happened. And so they developed Amsterdam Rainproof, which Amsterdam Rainproof, because there was no cloudbursts happening, didn't have massive investment in it, but instead forced them to think about how every single person has a role to play. And it was a new governance model that was built on half government and half non-government, making Rainproof an investment and linking Rainproof to every integrated work and thinking about how everyone has a role to play. And a saying that came out of Amsterdam Rainproof is do what you do, but make it rainproof. Their approach, they decided to rainproofing was more of a cultural shift, which was through a network strategy that connected the different sectors that were working across Amsterdam and making each of them integrate rainproof into their existing work, whether that was the governments, the NGOs, the insurance companies, to gardens and garden retail centers, and not only making them have rainproof integrated into their work, but actually communicate with one another so that there was less overlap in their work and all rainproofing would be integrated on a citywide level. So these are some images of you see the different sectors being put to work for rainproofing. And these are some of the achievements that Amsterdam Rainproof saw when they worked across the different sectors and how many people they got to actually take on a role and manage increased heavy rainfall. This is one of our favorite examples to show of a creative approach that Amsterdam took, which is they thought beyond reusing water to just like water their plants, but instead converted their water into beer and made rain beer. And that rain beer each had Amsterdam rainproof messaging on it. And I don't even drink, but I live in Europe right now, and I can tell you that was an amazing approach because beer is literally everywhere. Um, and they even followed it up with creating a rain bar where during happy hours, people would wear raincoats and they would be rained on, and messaging would be highlighted about Amsterdam Rainproof. And so this was showing how every single person was coming across Amsterdam Rainproof, even if their work wasn't in it. And so Rebuild by Design has been gaining so much inspiration from these two cities. And we took this inspiration and brought it to New York City, which is where I call home, and the work that I've been doing for the last 2 years, almost 2 years. So New York City has faced major rain events, which I know New Jersey is our neighbor. So you probably has also touched you, things like Hurricane Ida or Tropical Storm Ophelia. And New York City has a 100-year-old sewer system and little coordination among us, whether it's on a city agency scale or among the different sectors. So in 2024, Rebuild by Design worked with city agencies and nonprofit partners to launch the Rainproof New York City Working Group, a 6-month process that brought together 97 experts across different sectors with varied experience and expertise to tackle 3 identified challenges. And the challenges being 1, managing increased heavy rainfall, 2, looking at housing mobility, and 3, thinking about building the capacity of every single New Yorker on addressing heavy rainfall. And these are what we call Rainproof New York City achievements, but they're more than just numbers. It shows that New Yorkers are ready to take action against our increasing heavy rainfall. We're now connected with even more New Yorkers to build a unified network that shares expertise, empowers our communities, and tackles flooding together, and recognizing that flooding is an issue beyond New York City. From this Rainproof Working Group process, we put together 23 implementable rainproof recommendations and 5 guiding principles that work beyond the working group process. And so I want to spotlight some of these rainproof recommendations that came out of the process. And I want to highlight that these are pre-vetted because they were across the many different sectors and experiences. Some of these recommendations include developing a citywide education program to increase awareness of the role of nature-based solutions. 2, ensuring that the city's buyout program is implementing equitably and is renter inclusive, since within buyouts, the conversation is usually centered around homeowners. And 3, thinking about communities that already have trusted members in it. How can we utilize that? How can we tap into it? So creating risk translators and training and equipping community members that are already trusted within their communities to actually translate that risk of flooding, whether it's through language or accessibility. And here you see that our Rainproof Symposium where we published these recommendations, but beyond that was a moment where every New Yorker that came that wasn't part of the Rainproof Working Group process took an action on how we can each rainproof New York City. And here you see the Rebuild by Design team holding these commitments from New Yorkers. Some of the commitments include integrating rainproof language into climate bills they're already working on, initiating connection and collaboration among their communities, designing a rainproof toolkit, or thinking about rain gardens. And so Rebuild by Design is continuing this work and thinking about how we can continue the momentum of Rainproof for New York City. And we're bringing Rainproof New York City recommendations to neighborhoods through our Rainproof Your Communities Name program, which funds $10,000 to 10 community partners working to localize the recommendations that came out of Rainproof on a local scale through innovative approaches like using AI for renters or using public art murals that collect flooding stories. And everything that I just gave you was a very high level review. And so this is our recently published report that captures the full Rainproof New York City process. And I just want to emphasize that this report is not just a documentation of the process, but it's a resource for action and inspiration to create replicability in places like New Jersey. And so I want to center this conversation. How can we each bring Rainproof to New Jersey? I'll leave you with this. Our goal through Rainproof and through Rainproof New York City is to be a replicable model for systematic approach. Every success story that I shared today, whether it was Amsterdam, Copenhagen, or New York City, drew from an equitable multi-benefit approach that utilized blue-green infrastructure and emphasized the role that every single person has to play. And as you listen to the 2 other presentations that are working in New Jersey, think of the lessons that you've learned from these cities and think about how each of us can bring Rainproof uniquely to New Jersey. Let's make Rainproof the new standard. And if you want to learn more about these different places and you want to gain even more inspiration, you can look at our series where we actually bring speakers from these different cities to actually talk about how their process went more in detail. And so I leave you with that, and I'm happy to take any questions at the end to how to use this process as inspiration and begin a Rainproof New Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you, Rifal. And now it is my great honor to welcome you and to take a moment to recognize two exceptional leaders whose work has profoundly shaped the environmental landscape of New Jersey. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chris Obropta, a distinguished professor at Rutgers University and specialist in all things water resources and climate resilience. His efforts have not only advanced cutting-edge research, but have translated science into real-world solutions that benefit our communities today. And equally deserving of our deepest admiration is Greg Remaud, who will be speaking with Chris today, who is a dedicated conservationist and visionary and serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the New York, New Jersey Baykeeper. And together, they exemplify the very best of environmental leadership. Please join me in welcoming their discussion today. Take it away.
Greg, you got to unmute yourself, man. We're off to a good start here.
That oops. That might be the first time anybody told me to unmute myself, Chris.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
So thanks. I'm sure I speak for Chris when I say thank you very much to Rebuild by Design and Rain Ready New York for the series of discussions on the growing impacts on flooding and community solutions to those impacts that stem from climate change. We're very glad to be here with Hannah and Rifal this evening. I'm Greg Remaud. I've switched titles. It's Executive Director of New York, New Jersey Baykeeper. We're part of the global waterkeeper movement. There's over 300 individual local waterkeepers throughout the globe, over 200 throughout the United States. Baykeeper's been for over 30 years a watchdog and advocate for clean water and the communities around the New York, New Jersey harbor. We operate advocacy program, a legal program, and an urban environmental education program. A lot of our work has focused on protecting and adding to green infrastructure throughout Northeast New Jersey. A few examples of this have been that we've either led or partnered on over 36 acquisition and restoration projects that have protected over 2,000 acres in this densely developed Northeast New Jersey regions. So where every acre makes a difference for a variety of reasons: recreation, flood control, cooling off city and urban areas. So we've worked with many partners on achieving that. We've partnered with the Hackensack Riverkeeper and the New Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority to create what's known as the Meadowlands Conservation Trust, which protects properties throughout the Meadowlands and throughout the Hackensack River watershed and protects them permanently from being developed. We have easements over those properties, work with a lot of the communities in those areas. We've also had the great pleasure of working with the River Rats of Bloomfield. Bloomfield has this incredible community of advocates led by Nick Joanno and Susan Abear and Mary Shaughnessy. And it took 2 decades, but there was an 18-acre site that flooded up to 1.5 feet, but yet was developable. And there's a developer that was going to develop it. And that was because old floodplain maps were being used in an area that physically demonstrated flooding. That said, the advocates worked and we worked with them, going to town meetings, stopping the development, and then acquiring the properties. These were private properties, which 5 years ago turned into the extraordinary Lion Gate Park, which includes 4.5 acres of wetlands that were designed to hold over 10 million gallons of water during storm events. So those are a few areas where we've been able to work on green infrastructure. And lastly, I'd mention that I have the great honor of being co-chair with the Venerable Nicole Miller at Newark Dig, where together with Chris Obropta and Kim Gaddy of the South Ward Environmental Alliance, we were the leadership team for Newark Dig, and Dig stands for Doing Infrastructure Green. So that's a little bit about Baykeeper and our intersection on this issue, but this is really about talking with Dr. Obropta, and I'm going to read a little additional introduction about Chris to everybody. He's very well known throughout New Jersey, probably throughout the region. Dr. Obropta's is not only a PhD, but also a physical engineer, a certified engineer, and is director of New Jersey Water Resources Research Institute. He's an extension specialist in water resources with Rutgers Cooperative Extension, and he's a professor at the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences at Rutgers University. Chris leads a highly specialized and great staff from the Rutgers Cooperative Resource Program to identify water resource issues and engage communities to employ practices of science-based practices and solutions to help create a more equitable and sustainable New Jersey. With that, I'll leave you, and Chris, sit back and listen to your introductory presentation.
Can you see my slides there, Greg? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. Can you hear me all right?
It's not in full screen. Oh, now it is.
There you go. Full screen? Better?
Perfect.
Okay. So this is my email address and my website, and you feel free to send me an email, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. I do run the Rutgers Cooperative Extension Water Resources Program. Rutgers is a land-grant college for the state of New Jersey. Part of our mission is to give back to the state of New Jersey. And usually it used to be all about agriculture, but we stopped growing corn and started growing houses in New Jersey. So really it's a lot about urban, suburban. I really work for the 9 million people in the state. This is my water resources program's mission. You know, obviously it has all the proper buzzwords in it, engaging and empowering communities to employ practical science-based solutions to create a more equitable and sustainable Jersey. What that really means is my job is to run around the state and help people solve their water problems, and to do it with based on sound science and in a cost-effective manner, because nobody has any money. Okay, so we talk a lot about New Jersey. You heard a little bit about New York City and Copenhagen, but New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the nation. We got 21 counties, 564 municipalities. 2 have merged recently. So really you have 564 little fiefdoms, like mayors who are in control of their own land. That's a very home rule state. 95% of our waterways are impaired. We have 21 combined sewer communities, lots of harmful algal blooms, as you can see in the lower right-hand corner. And we get hammered by floods. Ida, Henry, Sandy, and all the nor'easters. It usually only takes about 1.5 inches of rain in New Jersey for cars to start floating away. And climate change is real. We have sea level rise here. We have more severe storm events, and we have this extreme heat on occasion where we see a huge heat island effect around our cities. So people always wonder about the cause of the problems in New Jersey, and the dense population, of course, and the people and the urbanization is the big cause of it. We do have farms in New Jersey, and there are programs that deal with farms. And we do have new development in New Jersey, not a lot. New Jersey's probably the first state that reaches build out, and that'll probably happen in a couple of weeks is what it looks like now. But what a real problem is existing development. We had a lot of development that was built before the stormwater regulations were even came into effect. So there's a lot of development that has no stormwater management at all, which is a huge problem, right? So my role at Rutgers, you know, you talk a little bit about research, and we do a lot of R&D with cooperative extension. It doesn't stand for research and development. It stands for rip off and duplication. So we're okay with going to New York City and stealing their programs and using them in New Jersey and going to Copenhagen and doing the same thing, as long as we can help the residents of our state. So we do a lot of work with communities. When you're dealing with stormwater management, you have to get involved with the people. We do design demonstration projects. We implement the projects. We empower the communities to do more projects, and then we create local leaders. We have a Green Infrastructure Champion program where we're trying to create leaders that can advocate for green infrastructure on the local level, and that's been very, very effective. Okay, so let's talk about combined sewers for a minute and climate change. New Jersey has 21 communities that have combined sewers. There's about 217 combined sewer overflows, or CSOs. You can see them in red. They're in the very urban part of the state. A lot of them are in the northeastern part of the state, around Newark and Jersey City and Hoboken. And then you have a few down in the southern part of Delaware. We have Camden and Gloucester City. Okay, so combined sewers are interesting. When it rains, just a little bit of water, that water goes to the wastewater treatment plant. And when you flush your toilet, it goes in the pipe, goes to the wastewater treatment plant. When it rains, the rainwater goes in the same pipe and goes to the wastewater treatment plant, gets treated. The problem is those pipes are small and they can't handle a lot of rainfall. So whenever you get more than a quarter or a half-inch of rain, these pipes overflow, and you get a slurry of human wastewater and stormwater going into local waterways, into the streets, and into people's basements. I know it sounds medieval, but it's happening today, and it's going to happen later on today when we get thunderstorms. A couple ways to solve this. One way is gray infrastructure. We can actually separate those combined sewers and have a pipe that just takes the sanitary line and a pipe that just takes the stormwater line. The problem is now we're taking stormwater, which is dirty water off the roads and the rooftops, and dumping it right into the river, which isn't much better, all right? We could have this gray infrastructure underground, these big tunnels where we hold the water until the wastewater treatment plant can handle it, and then we can pump it to the treatment plant, they can treat it, and then we clean the water. The problem is these pipes are very expensive. These underground systems store this water, and there's really no ancillary benefit. All there is a lot of destruction and demolition of people's property and inconveniencing people's lives as they're putting these things in. So another way to do this is with green infrastructure. So one way to stop these combined sewers from overflowing is to capture the rainwater before it gets into the combined sewer. And as climate continues to change, these rainfall events are getting more and more severe. So the 1-inch thunderstorm becomes a 2-inch thunderstorm. And now we start seeing a lot more of these overflows. So we can start catching that water in these types of systems, right? Green infrastructure is just a nice way for stormwater management. The idea is it captures the water near its source. So instead of building one big basin at the bottom of the hill to capture all the runoff from the development, you're scattering things throughout the entire development and trying to capture rainwater where it lands before it becomes stormwater runoff. Then you filter it with these systems and you try to get it back into the ground, infiltrate into the ground, or you grab it, you hold it, and you reuse it, right? So green infrastructure has a lot of different functions. These are the 5 main ones that we see from it. Some practices will do all 5 of these. Some will just do 1 or 2. So infiltration, we're trying to grab the water, get it back in the ground. Filtration, we're trying to clean the water. Storage, we have a lot of rainwater harvesting systems. We're storing the water and reusing the water, okay? Evaporation and transpiration, well, now we're putting systems that will allow vegetation to pull up water out of the ground, and that vegetation to transpire through the leaves and evaporate back into the atmosphere. A lot of times we combine that term into evapotranspiration, but these are the 5 common functions of green infrastructure. Okay, and these are the main practices that we use. We start with bioretention systems. Bioretention is a very technical, scary word I found as here at Cooperative Extension, but when we call it rain gardens, it's much easier to understand, or bioswales. So these are things that grab the water, filter the water with vegetation, and get the water back into the ground. We've got permeable pavements, rainwater harvesting, dry wells, and of course, rooftop systems, green roofs and blue roofs, which are often considered the sexiest of all green infrastructure practice, the green roof, but it's also one of the most expensive. It's hard to retrofit older buildings with this because they can't hold that extra weight. So it's really good technology for new construction and not so great for retrofitting older construction. So one big thing about green infrastructure is you really need to get the community involved. And Greg mentioned NorcDig before. We started doing this work back in 2011, started down in Camden. We formed a group called Camden Smart, Stormwater Management and Resource Training. We came up to Newark and we formed Newark Dig, doing infrastructure green. And then in Perth Amboy, we got Perth Amboy Swim, stormwater infrastructure management. We've got groups in Patterson and other places, Jersey City, other places in New Jersey. But the idea was to get a group of people together in the community and have people from the town there, people from the public works guys there, people from the neighborhoods there, people from the universities there, people from the nonprofits there, to all talk about how do we use green infrastructure to better manage stormwater runoff in our communities, right? So then we actually, Newark Dig was a great group. They started back in 2013. You see Kim Gaddy in the picture there. She's in the center. She's with the South Ward Environmental Alliance. Well, she's one of the people who started these green infrastructure reformers. So taking people from the community, teaching them about green infrastructure, and then sending them back into their community to educate the people. And then we started working with Newark Greenworks, or Newark Workforce Development Group, and started training people on how to build and maintain green infrastructure. So we're starting a workforce development program around this, right? And the whole idea is that when we build projects in Newark, the money should stay in Newark. If we can hire a local company to build a project, they hire local people. Those local people spend the money in the city, and the money stays in the city and builds wealth in the city for the community in the city, instead of what they always do, where they hire an outside consultant from Caldwell or Montclair, and the money leaves Newark and goes other places. This is a way to really build equity in the community and some wealth. Like I said, Newark Dig was formed in 2013, lots of different stuff. In the beginning, we started doing projects. We had gotten some funding from the 319H program in New Jersey, which is 319H is a section of the Clean Water Act that passes money from EPA to New Jersey DEP, and then they happened to give us a grant to do environmental justice work in Newark, and we took that and started building rain gardens. And we started putting in trees and working with youth and working with the community members. We started putting in cisterns for community gardens because the water company wouldn't put a spigot on a community garden lot because they were worried about losing money. So we started harvesting rainwater from nearby rooftops so they could use that to water their gardens, right? And you see the community here is involved. They're doing the work. They're getting excited about it. And they're learning how to do this stuff too. So it's another aspect of what we're trying to accomplish, right? There's a project, Fairmont Ave project in Newark that we did. So the Baykeeper was able to get us a little bit of money, and we had some funding from other sources. And we decided to do a Green Street project around the Cityplex. This is the movie theater here, Cityplex here on the left. Let me see if I can turn my pointer on here. This is the Cityplex. Now, why do we pick that? Well, because Shaquille O'Neal owns the Cityplex, and we thought, hey, maybe we can convince him to give us some money, and or at least maybe some free pizza from his pizza place. So we looked at the Cityplex, and we said, well, let's start working on the streets around it and see if we could put in green infrastructure to manage the stormwater runoff from the parking lots, the roadways, and the rooftops, right? So we always come up with a conceptual design like this. This turned into a full set of engineering drawings, shovel-ready projects. And then New Jersey DEP wound up giving us $1.1 million to build this project. And we're just about to put the project out to bid over the next few weeks. So this is a really exciting time for us here in Newark. And you can see some of the renderings here, some rain gardens at the entrance to the movie theater where people kind of get back to the street. And the bus stops there on the corner, you know, the roadway rain gardens that we're putting in. So these gives people some idea of what it looks like. And I know you'd rather see these than my ugly engineering drawings. So this is kind of why we're showing this to you. The other thing we did was,
Hey, Chris,
what's that?
Chris, I'm sorry. After this slide, you know, we could talk about this all day, but
Right.
it would be good to go into the questions, and because there's some follow-up that we can get into and some of the same issues that we can talk about in
Okay,
2
let
minutes.
me go through Hyatt Court quickly, and then
Yeah.
we could jump onto that. So Hyatt Court is a housing authority project, Newark Housing Authority, and we've tried to work with them about 20 years, and we finally got some feedback, and this is the development. It was built before World War II, and we came up with some renderings. You see the pictures in the right-hand corner, and you can see here's the buildings, and in the upper left is the existing condition, and the right is what we're proposing. Now, we got shovel-ready plans for this, and the Newark Housing Authority got $500,000 from DEP to build some of these projects, okay? And you can see we have some porous pavement in here. So really adding some beauty to the community, but also managing some of the stormwater. This does have a lot of localized flooding that these rain gardens can handle, and you can see some more pictures here. So this is my final slide, Greg. There's a lot of hope for Newark. You know, we've got funding for some of these projects. Newark actually hired a green infrastructure coordinator, a company called HDR. We have designed 10 other projects with HDR. They're going to put those out to bid. I think they're going to try to get state money to do those projects from the Water Bank or the Environmental Infrastructure Trust Act. And then Newark did receive some money from the Harbor Estuary Program. We did a few more designs. So our goal with this is to do as many shovel-ready designs as possible. So when money becomes available, we can actually go ahead and get that money to put projects in the ground. Okay, so let me stop there, and I'll take your questions. What kind of questions do you have, Greg? Anything good?
I hope so. I'm going to start with I think from the more challenging to the more inspirational.
Oh,
Three
there we go.
questions
Okay.
that we have to cover relatively quickly. Okay, so first is, I mean, the extraordinary work that's gone on throughout the state and green infrastructure has been really inspiring. The projects that you just spoken about, all this green infrastructure, and it's great. And what it's done is really been able to hold back and re-release stormwater from light rains, which reduces the amount that goes into CSOs. So there's less raw sewage in the waterways, less flooding on people's streets and in our local, in our communities. But despite all the benefits from the green infrastructure, when we get those larger coastal storms that you mentioned, I, it seems like we need more robust solutions in addition to the green infrastructure. And I was wondering if you could talk about what's going on there. Have we been doing a good job? What do we
No,
need to
actually,
do?
we've been doing a horrible job with that. Even the existing stormwater management we have are these big basins, and that's supposed to grab the water, hold the water, let it slowly out after the storm. And what we're finding is that even when we get the 100-year storm, 8-10 inches of rain, those basins fill up, but 75 to 85% of that water is already out of that basin before the storm ends 24 hours later, going downstream to flood out the stream. So we're doing a terrible job of that. So green infrastructure, you're right, we'll manage the first few inches of rain, we'll stop some localized flooding, but you need to couple it with some other systems that will store the water. So we're looking at, for example, the town of Manville floods out quite often, and it's in central Jersey, Somerset County. Now, Manville is next to Hillsborough, and Hillsborough's got a Royce Brook watershed. And the Royce Brook flows through Hillsborough into Manville, about 95% of the watersheds in Hillsborough. So to stop the flooding in Manville, you have to do stuff in Hillsborough. So Hillsborough wasn't interested in stopping flooding in Manville. Why should we pay for money to stop the neighboring town from flooding? Until Ida came in and some of their roads flooded, 2 people drowned in the flooding. So now they're very interested in stopping flooding in their community. And we went in and we looked at 10 existing developments that had no stormwater management. And we're trying to figure out where we can put stormwater management in, not just to capture the 100-year storm or those big hurricanes, but to hold it until well after the storm. So there's this thing called AI. I think you might have heard about it, artificial intelligence, right? So my students use it to write their essays at Rutgers, and I pretend like I don't know they're using it for that, and it's a game we play, but there's other uses for AI. What if we put one of these big underground storage systems like they have in Hoboken under the park, put a big underground storage system in and hold the entire storm, and then have that outlet for that system talk to the stream? What if it talks to the stream downstream, and when that stream gets to a certain level, then the gate on that system starts to slowly open and let the water out when the stream can handle it? It seems pretty simple. One big basin, one stream, easy. What if there's 20 basins, 30 basins? You can coordinate the whole thing through this artificial intelligence system where you can release the water slowly and really have a positive effect on downstream Manville. We're never going to solve the flooding problems in Manville by doing stuff in Manville. We have to do it upstream. And that's always a common thing we see. I was in Camden once, and a planner came in and said, "Oh, this is the area where it floods. We should put green infrastructure there." I said, "No, we got to put green infrastructure uphill to keep the water from getting down there if you want to stop flooding." So thinking about things, where can we hold the water? Last Rebuild by Design, you had Nick Agnorero talking from DEP. He's talking about the Blue Acres program. It's a great program. They're buying houses in floodplains or knocking them down, getting people out of harm's way. But what if we bought houses upstream, uphill of the floodplain? We bought 2 houses and turned them into a stormwater park in that 100-lot subdivision and managed all the water from that 100-lot subdivision on that property and kept it from going downstream, causing that flooding where those people are in the floodplain. So thinking about things differently is what we need to do. And that's why we're bringing in engineers from Holland to come here and tell us what they're doing, and other places to share their ideas. We need to do a better job of thinking about how we might be able to do this thing differently. Why are there parking lots in New Jersey where they're not pervious pavement? We should be storing water under every parking lot in this state, right? I mean, it's a simple solution and something that can easily be done. Why aren't we doing it? You know, so these are things that I think about a lot and stay up late at night thinking about. And, you know, when I'm drinking my sip of bourbon, thinking about that. So,
All right, so we have a lot of work to do there, and we
Yeah.
need to, as advocates, we all need to push harder to help these bolder ideas come in, become implemented and start to work for us. Quick, I think you may have already answered this when you talked a little bit about Newark Dig, but what's an example, if you had to give an example of something that's working really well, along with, you know, outside of your program, which has been extraordinary, what's working well that can be replicated in other places? And
Well,
who should people be looking at? What projects would you highlight?
you know, I'm not sure about highlighting projects, but or more process, right? So, when we're dealing with any kind of area, whether it's urban, rural, suburban, you need to get the people involved, right? You need to explain to them what you're doing, why you're doing it, get them engaged. Newark does a great job of that. So when I first went into Newark in 2011, I was this professor from Rutgers. Nobody knew me, right? But Kim Gaddy invited me to a meeting, and Kim Gaddy is a local, fourth-generation Norker, and she brings me to a meeting. She said, "This is my friend Chris, and he's going to talk to us about stormwater management, about green infrastructure." Because that group trusted Kim, they immediately trusted me. So that her trust got thrown on my shoulders. And Kim and I have been working together. We've been working together for 12 years now, right? Just great relationship.
I remember she used to side eye you. Now
Yeah,
she
yeah,
calls you
she's always
Dr.
nervous
O.
about me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
but you know, but it was great because once you get in, you could talk for them. But the best thing I ever did was I taught Kim Gaddy and Nicole Miller about green infrastructure early on before they knew anything about it. And we were invited to speak to Newark City Council. And Kim gets up there and you know, she's local, you know, Black woman from the neighborhood, and everybody knows her. And she gets up there and she starts talking about green infrastructure like she invented it. My words are coming out of her mouth like she created green infrastructure. It was amazing. She nailed it. And then Nicole gets up, the same thing. She's lived in Newark all her life, you know, and they know her in the community. She gets up front, same thing. And it's amazing hearing them speak about with that passion. And they won the city council over. They turned to me and said, "Chris, you want to say anything?" I had nothing to say. They said it all, you know, and that's so important to be able to engage the community, get them to speak the right language, get them to know the science behind it, you know, so they're not just talking about, you know, no one's going to say it's fake news. Well, we heard from Rutgers University. We don't do fake news at Rutgers University. You know, we're all about science. So I think that was really great. So having those local
Yeah.
groups, engaging them, spending time with them. The biggest problem I see though is when funders come in to fund project, they want to fund brick and mortar, and they don't want to fund those community outreach groups, and that's a huge mistake. You know, they need money to do what they do. You know, they're working hard. We need to allocate a bigger portion of their budget so they can engage with the community. And that's always been an issue that I've had where I've gotten grants and they say, "Well, you've got a lot of money in here for outreach. We want you to cut that down," and not understanding the importance of that. Just want to get projects in the ground. And you can't get projects in the ground if you don't have the community engaged. So,
All right. And the last question, and I couldn't agree more. And Kim and Nicole have done a phenomenal job. And they punctuated it with this is happening on this street. And
yeah,
that's happening on that street. So along with your wonderful, wonderful words, Chris,
yeah,
which are wonderful, they also, you know, brought that local knowledge that no one else can bring in
right, right.
authenticity. So but speaking of authenticity, this is I think it's really important and rarely gets discussed. So we have a couple minutes left, and I want to ask you, your path to Rutgers has been a little bit of a winding path, but you are a person, just like you said, Nicole, you know, her premature gave you entree into Newark. Well, the same with you. When we talk to DEP on restoration projects or other communities, they say, oh, well, Chris Obropta and his team are involved. Oh, okay, we're into it. But you're also known that you speak your mind, which is one of the reasons you and I have always gotten along well and like to insult each
Oh,
other. But is that you've told it like it is, and that's not always appreciated. Um,
well,
but
Greg,
without saying any more, I'm
I'm
just
from
trying to set a
Jersey.
little bit of the context and hope you
Yeah.
talk about your job as a professional engineer and then making it here to Newark, why you did that, how you did it, and what some of the results. And if you could do that in 2 or 3 minutes, I would
Yeah,
be
so I'm born and raised Jersey, and I'm always going to tell you like it is. I was an environmental consultant for 12 years. I got my professional engineering license. I was doing great work. I love what I did. When you're an environmental consultant, you often work for the bad guy because they're the ones with all the money, so you're trying to get them off the hook. I went to school at night, got my PhD at night, not because I wanted to, but because my wife was getting her doctorate of education. I refused to let her be smarter than me, so I went back to school for my PhD. I got my PhD. I plan to go back to consulting, and I got a phone call from Keith Cooper at Rutgers. He was a dean of research, and he demanded I come interview for this job with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. Now, even when I was a consultant, I would spend a lot of time giving back to the community. I worked with a lot of the nonprofits. I helped them write grants. So when they got a grant, we would get a little contract, and it's kind of my way of giving back, even though I was working for a lot of these other bad guys. Um, when I got to Rutgers, I didn't know what cooperative extension was, but I loved the idea of extending the knowledge university out to help the people. And I immediately started hiring people and hiring staff and young people. The idea was if I could hire somebody right out of college, they could work for me for 3 years. Because they're a Rutgers employee, tuition's free. They get a master's degree, 3 years experience, and they can move on. So we were hired a lot of people like that, and some of them stayed with us for up to 10 years. And it's been really a wonderful experience. I thought when I came to university, I was going to be like my professors were. I had a professor who, they showed up on Thursday morning to teach class. You never saw them again. I thought professors only worked 4 hours a week. I work like 70 hours a week still, and and I'm probably do that for the next 10 years. I think people just work the way they work. I've got a lot of young, dedicated staff though, and I don't pay them a lot because I can't because of where we are at Rutgers. We get grant money and we're able to pay what we can pay, but they're there not so much for the money, but because they feel like they're making a difference. I even have consultants who I've met and been doing consulting for 20 years and have talked to me, how can we come work with you, Chris? Because I want to give back, and there's nothing more exciting than going to a community and building something and seeing it rain and seeing it make a difference, seeing them smile on the kid's face and getting someone excited about what we do. And then working with people like yourself, Greg. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and yeah, so I sleep 3 hours a night, but who cares? It's
sleep
all
three
it's all
hours a
enjoyable.
night.
Yeah,
I'm
it's about
guessing
it.
your salary isn't quite what it was in the
Yeah,
private
it's funny because
sector.
I see some of my old colleagues that I used to work with, and he's got that they're rich when they got the car with the German car with the windshield washers on the windshield wipers on the headlights, yeah, they got some money, and I'm driving my beat up Toyota pickup, and I got people yelling at me, why don't you buy an electric truck? I'm like, okay, why don't you pay me more? I could do that. But so it's not about the money. Even when I do get, like, sometimes I'll get a stipend for giving a talk or doing something, and I always donate it back to the program. So we're trying to keep the program going. This whole thing with what's going on with Elon Musk and Donald Trump in Washington is a little nerve-wracking because we do get some money from NOAA, and we're worried about that going away. But we keep plugging away. I got 12
Well,
full-time staff now.
yeah.
More than anybody else does at
And you've
Rutgers.
allowed not only Newark Dig, Baykeeper, any other group that you've worked with to do so much more with their work. The design plans that you provided were extraordinary. Not only were they more detailed and on the mark with what we wanted, which traditional engineering firms can't always give, but they also were a fraction of the cost. But we should move over and let other people. I've had the pleasure of asking you a
Yeah.
few questions, but I think it's time for us to allow the audience to start grilling you.
Alrighty. Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Greg, for asking the questions and moderating, and Chris for your very interesting and honest answers. And we have a Michelle here who has a question for you and is seeking advice about starting a course in engineering starting a service learning for engineers course for honors college students. The majors are working specifically on surveying the community and coming up with solutions for needs specifically around the Second River in Passaic, I believe. What recommendations do you have for that course and for inspiring students to get involved?
So I do a lot of work with students, and it's pretty easy to get them excited about stuff where they can get outside and get their hands dirty, you know. Um, I think one of the things that I try to encourage my students is to really think out of the box, right? You know, you can go on Google and Google an answer, but think about what you're really trying to solve and how you can incorporate as much into it as possible, right? Anybody could design a pollinator garden where they dump a load of dirt on their front lawn and put flowers on it. But what if you made it a rain garden? So now you're managing rainwater, you're sequestering carbon, you know, you're still creating a pollinator habitat. So thinking about how you could design things that have multiple uses, and then thinking about how you could design things that will actually regenerate themselves. We do a lot of stream restoration projects where we're starting the restoration, and as the plants grow, it's starting to restore itself. So that's another great aspect of what we're trying to do. I tend to give the kids, my senior design students, I give them each a rain garden to design. I explain to them what it is. Some of them come back with they're engineers, so some of them come back to these really ugly rectangle gardens. Others come back with something very creative with seating for people and thinking about placemaking, which is very unusual for an engineer. Usually they're about nuts and bolts, you know. So I think trying to encourage students to really think out of the box and don't just grab a solution off the shelf. Grab that solution off the shelf, but make it your own. You know, like I said, we do a lot of R&D. We rip off and duplicate, and I'll steal programs from New York, but I'll put a Jersey twist on them. You know, I'll make it work for Newark as opposed to what may be happening in New York City. You know, so these are things that I think we need to get students thinking about. Is how do you think about problems differently? Because there's a lot of problems out there that they need to solve, right? So I hope that's helpful.
There are certainly a lot of problems out there that need solving, but the work that you two are doing together is really putting us on a right track, luckily. Another question that I got sent to me was, what are the biggest challenges that you face while working on your stormwater management projects?
Well, so it depends where we are. Like if we're in an urban area, a lot of we really don't know what's under that surface. You know, we have some idea where the pipes are and things like that. We would put a shovel in the ground. We never know what we're going to hit. You know, we had to put a rain garden at a lot in Newark. We found the whole concrete front steps, and PSE&G was doing work down the road, and they brought their big machine down and got it out for us. You know, but so you never really know what you're gonna find. Money's always a big issue because we need money to do projects. But really, the thing that we struggle with the most is how do we get people excited about this? Because the only way we're going to fix this problem is by changing behavior. So we really need to get people to understand what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it. You know, a lot of people running around screaming climate changes are real, it's fake. You know, I don't care if you believe it or not. The rainfall events are getting stronger, and you know that. You can see that, right? I don't care if you believe why it's happening, whatever. Let's figure out how we're going to address that, how we're going to protect ourselves from that. So for us, it's all about, you know, how do you protect human life, how you protect property, and how do you protect the ecology that we're trying to restore. So I think those are some of the issues, but really getting people engaged is always hard. Because you think about me, I'm an engineer, but I could talk to people. Most engineers, there's two types of engineers. There's the introvert, and they stare at their shoes when they talk to you, and there's the extrovert, and they stare at your shoes when they talk to you. So these are the engineers that are trying to convey information to the public, and it just never works. Greg and I have been to these long-term control plan meetings for the combined sewer overflows, and the engineer gets up and he tries to talk to the public, and their eyes glaze over in about 2 minutes. Everything goes over their head. So putting things in terminology that people understand is very important too, and getting them on board, trying to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how they can help. And people want to feel like they can make a difference. Right now, America feels like, oh my God, there's no hope, right? but there is a hope. I don't care who's down in Washington. You could go home right now, Hannah, and you could build a rain garden at your house. And that rain garden will sequester enough carbon to offset 1 or 2 automobiles, right? One rain garden at your house, right? So if everybody had one of those, that would offset all our automobiles, right? So you can do that. And it doesn't matter if it's Trump down in Washington or who's down there. It's your property. You can do what you want with it, right? You can go to your community and say, listen, let's build a rain garden at the library. There's no one controlling that. It's just your town, right? You can convince them to do that, right? They're not expensive. They're easy to do. A little bit of elbow grease, you can get it done. So using Washington as an excuse, I'm just tired of that. Oh, things are going bad, and I don't care. You could still take action. You can still do something. And people like Greg and I, we don't take that. That's not a good excuse. Musk, who cares? Just go out and do something right. So that's another piece of what we're trying to get across, I think.
You
I'm
really
sure
bring
we
up a
get
good
reprimanded for that, but yeah, okay, it's fine.
No, you bring up a good point that we need to exercise our free will. And there's so much you can do with a lawn creatively and to help your environment. And why not have fun with it and try to do more if you can do something at your home.
Yeah, I
And
mean, why would you have a lawn? I mean, you gotta water it, you gotta mow it.
a lot
You
of
can
work.
put a beautiful well, at least make some of it into a wildflower meadow. I mean, do something with it. The monarch butterfly are going extinct. I mean, you could save them. Put some milkweed out. There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff you can do. You take some personal responsibility. Put a rain barrel in, for crying out loud. Do something. Turn off Netflix, get off the couch, and go do something. There's nothing better than building a garden and weeding. Great exercise. Great exercise. So
Right, right. I always say that one way to deal with climate anxiety is by doing something, no matter how big or small it is. Whether it's changing your garden or picking up some trash or even doing something larger, like getting involved with an organization and doing larger work. Every action matters. I know we're over time at this point. We have 2 questions in the chat, and if we
sure.
could maybe give quick answers to them, anyone who wants to stay is welcome to stay. But we have a question from Nicole Miller herself, and I wanted to bring it up to you. If you could, both of you, this is a question for both of you. How about Greg, you go first, and then Chris. What incentives should municipalities offer to encourage property owners to install green infrastructure?
Well, you certainly, on the local level, you know what, Chris, do you have a quick and ready answer?
Yeah, so
Go ahead, I'll
we do a
stall.
rain garden rebate program. And so people come and hear me speak about rain gardens. They can come for an hour, and my engineers and landscape architects will help them design a rain garden. I've got green infrastructure champions to help them design rain gardens. And they put a rain garden in, we'll give them $400 to $1,000 rebate. It's usually from grant money. That's not enough to hire someone to build it, but it's enough to put the plants in and the mulch and help offset some of the costs. And that's a great way of doing things. That's one thing we're hoping people do. And the other thing is some tax incentives. Right? If you got a 5-acre piece of property and you can maybe turn a piece of it, into something that's going to manage stormwater, maybe the town can give you a break on your taxes. So these are things that we've been trying to think about, is how can you do that as a means of getting homeowners to take action. So there's only so much goodwill that they have that I want to save the plan and I'm going to do this, but when you stick that shovel in the ground in Hunterdon County, you hit that shale, it gets a little bit more harder to do that kind of work. So
Right. The other thing we've done, and you've done it, and Nicole's done it, and Kim, and a lot of our friends, is that make it easy for the public officials.
Yeah.
They do it all the time. We're going to do the work. We're going to get the designs. We're going to put all this together. We need a very small amount of money, and sometimes we can match that money or and extend the project. And we're so thankful, come out, cut the ribbon, let folks know that you've been part of making this happen in your community. So that's the other very inexpensive leverage and incentive that we often use.
it's always fun when a politician shows up to a project to cut the ribbon and we're looking around and he stands up there and he says, this wouldn't happen if it wasn't for this person. And he points to another politician. And those of us who actually built the project,
We're being nice here, Chris.
we never saw them. Who were those people? But we don't care. We don't care if it takes credit, Greg. It doesn't matter.
That's
As long
right.
as it gets
That's
done.
right.
That's
it.
We don't
That's
care.
the bottom line.
It's just got to get done.
Yeah.
What other question do you have, Hannah?
One more question from Keon. Keon asks, how do we better bridge the gap between the academic community with this vital
Ah,
information and the overburdened neighborhoods often most impacted?
ooh. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Dr. Chris.
Well, you
Well,
had
I mean,
somewhat,
so I'm with Cooperative Extension, and we're really tailored around being an agriculture extension program. And for 20 years, I've been pushing an urban extension program. The whole idea with extension is you assess the community needs and address those needs. So what agriculture extension's been doing is, instead of doing that, they've been saying, well, we do programs in rural areas with goats, so we're going to do it in a city with a dog, you know? So that's not really what people need. So we've been trying to assess those needs and coming out there with solutions. The problem is not every university is a land grant college, and we do have departments in our university that study the urban areas a lot. And then come May 1st, after they get their grades, they're gone, you know, and people in towns are scratching their heads like, oh, they came and did all these design charrettes and nothing's going to happen. So I think you really need to be able to deliver on stuff. And that's one thing that we've been trying to do. And I think your question, you just have to find one faculty member who you want to engage with. And hopefully it's not me, I'm really busy, but there's a lot of people out there who are really interested in helping the community and just need somebody from the community to ask, you know, so that's very important. We do a green infrastructure champions program. We train people. Once they become a champion, we help them work with their community. So we're trying to do exactly what you're talking about. But you know, Dodge Foundation cut our funding, so we're still doing the program on a you know a wing and a prayer, but we're getting there, you know. So what else, Han? Anything else?
I think that's it at this point. I don't see any other questions. Oh, I'm sorry, one more question. One more question. What success metrics are considered for your project to be successful?
What success metrics? So we often look at how many acres of impervious cover we're managing, and we could translate it down to how many gallons of stormwater we're managing. So, you know, those are numbers that we put into some sort of table and show to funders. The real success, though, is a great example is I was in Hillsborough, and we went to build a rain garden in Hillsborough, and the town didn't want it. And we said, well, then we're going to give your money to the neighboring town, Montgomery. And Hillsborough and Montgomery always kind of trying to outdo each other. So the mayor in Hillsborough said, you're not giving our money to Montgomery. We're going to build a rain garden here. So the public works guys actually helped us build a rain garden. And it came out great. And they watered it. They took care of it. They weeded it. About a year later, Public Works calls me up and says, we got this flooding problem, Chris, and we're thinking about a rain garden. I said, Rich, a rain garden, you didn't even know what one was a year ago. He said, yeah, but it was easy to build. It was cost effective. We think it's a good solution. So here we've got a traditional public works director. He's taken this system and he's added it to his toolkit. And he never would have done that before. To me, that's a great success, right? It's a great success when I see my colleagues like Kim and Nicole be able to stand up in front of City Hall and talk about green infrastructure like they invented it. You know, it's a great success when I see my friend Greg fighting and fighting and fighting for Liberty State Park and winning every time, you know. So these are what we consider metrics of success. A lot of times it's a human dimension. A lot of times it's how we feel at the end of the day. Yeah, we've got all the numbers and all that nonsense is important, but you know, we're really, I think that the people that we touch, the people we affect is very important. I'm hoping someday that the kids who are growing up now will think about rainwater differently, the way I think about recycling differently. Because when I was a kid, they taught me about recycling. And now I'll walk around a conference all day with that aluminum can in my hand till I can find a recycling bin. And I want to throw it in the back of my car anyway. You know, I'm driving home because I couldn't find it. And I'm just trained for that. And maybe the kids will be trained that, hey, instead of putting a mound of dirt in my front yard, let's make it a depression. Let's hold some water there. Let's add pollinator plants, native pollinator plants. So we don't need to use the Japanese red maple. We can use something that's native, you know? So maybe we can get the kids there, and it'll be second nature. And that would be a great success. So,
I think that's all we can take for now.
okay, so I'm done preaching now. That's good.
I'm sure everyone's hungry for dinner as well. I really appreciate both of you Thank you so much for coming to speak to our members and our audience. It's wonderful to have any discussion with you both. And to those who are attending, now you know two great names in New Jersey that are doing wonderful work. If you would like to follow them and their journey and their organizations, you can look into Rutgers' Water Resources Extension and the New York, New Jersey Baykeepers. Both of them are extremely active in New Jersey and have a ton of information on their websites that you can bring for inspiration to your communities. And for us as well at Rebuild, we're here to inspire you too, and to bring more action to your community to help make your community safer from the next climate disaster. So in here, I've dropped the New Jersey webpage. Please feel free to check it out. And our upcoming event, we have another event next week with Commissioner Sean LaTourette of the NJDEP. And everyone who's registered for this will be getting the recording and follow-up afterwards. If you have any questions, my email is hcats@rebuildbydesign.org. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. And again, thank you so much, Chris and Greg, for coming to be with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you,
us.
Hannah. Thank you.
Have a good rest of your night, everyone. Thank
Take care,
you.
Greg. Take care.